Thanks. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming along here, because I know we've got Joel speaking next door, which I know is quite popular. So maybe if I finish early, we can all go and see what he's talking about. So yeah, who am I? My name's Nick. I'm a field technician at Jamf, and I cover the EMEA region. I don't know why I put a picture there, because that's me here. But as a field technician, primarily what I do is deliver jump starts with customers, with new customers. A jump start really is just setup and training in the Jamf Pro platform, formerly the Casper Suite. Some of you may remember it by that name. In the process of changing, kind of changed recently. So what do we do at Jamf? Fundamentally, we're helping organizations succeed with Apple. So we aim to empower your end users to be more creative, also at the same time hoping to make your lives easier. But how do we do that? Well, we utilize and we leverage DEP, for example, zero-touch deployment. We've also got device configuration, so configuration profiles. We've got app management, so that's VPP, volume purchasing program. We help to leverage that. Extensive inventory, security controls, and self-service. So hopefully using these tools that we can better empower your users and hopefully make your lives a bit easier. So currently, to just give you a few statistics there, as of Monday, I believe it is, we have 10,000 organizations who rely on Jamf. So we hit the magic 10,000 on Monday. We've got 7 of the top 10 technology companies. We've got 15 of the top 25 Fortune 500 companies. We have a 93% customer retention rate. I believe that's actually, there's a few statistics around that. They've changed. It depends if it's gone over the year or since we were founded. And 19 of the top 25 most valuable brands and 10 of the top 10 global marketing groups. Currently, there's 7 million devices globally being managed by Jamf Pro. We also have, I believe it is 40,000 members now on Jamf Nation. If you don't know what Jamf Nation is, I think most of you probably would do, but go check it out. If you Google anything pretty much to do with managing iPads or Mac, you'll probably find the top hit will be a Jamf Nation article. And we've also got 600 employees in 8 offices globally. But anyway, that's a bit about Jamf, and that's who we are. But why am I here to talk to you? Well, according to the program, it's MDM Education for Admins. That's not originally what I submitted as the title. Somewhere along the line, through emails, that changed. Originally, it was Pedagogy of MDM. So, if you're from education, you may be very familiar with this word. You probably use it quite often, a few heads nodding there. For those of you, it's not a made-up word, it is a genuine word. And what does that mean, essentially? Well, there's a definition. Principles, practices, or the profession of teaching. So it's the theory behind teaching. How do we best empower, how do we best pass on knowledge? What tools do we use? What methodologies, what practice do we use to best train and teach someone? So what does that mean in the context of MDM and what I'm talking about today? So pedagogy of MDM, so that's the principles and practices of basically teaching MDM. And I'm pretty sure somewhere it says that every presentation should have a quote. So that's my quote. Can't do a presentation without one apparently, I believe. If everyone is a genius, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will believe its whole life living is stupid. And that was from Einstein, who was dyslexic. Really, what I'm trying to say is be mindful of who it is that you're teaching and who you're trying to train. Everyone learns a bit differently. Everyone has different, got different specialisms maybe. So it's just to be a bit mindful of that when you're trying to teach and train someone. And that's my objective for today. Got to have an objective. So I appreciate the different ways that people learn and to develop a toolbox of principles and practices that help aid their development and understanding. So some of you may recognise this fine bearded Irishman. This is Jared Allen. So he's manager of field services at Jamf, or my boss, essentially. So he spoke last year and did a presentation called Be a Mentor, Not a Monster. Again, yeah, a bit of an exercise in do as I say, not as I do. But no, he's not a monster. You can see that, yeah. The objective from his presentation was to provoke thoughts around how you can make a difference and pass on your experiences. What I'd like to do is follow on from that a bit today and talk about how can we best pass on your experiences. What methods can we use? What tools do we have? So you could use a training methodology. And what is a training methodology? Well, there's a lovely definition for you there. There are many out there. You could cherry pick from them. You could use bits from different ones. But it's important to be mindful of using a methodology when training someone. So what do we do at Jamf? Well, at Jamf we adopt a bit of an active, interactive and participative methodology. We use this in our certification classes. I use this when I'm on a Jumpstart training new customers. And we also use this in our integrator program. So I'm going to talk about these three elements and how we use these teaching methodologies throughout what we do with our certification classes, integrators, and on Jumpstart. So what are the principles of this participative and interactive methodology that we use? Well, there's 6 elements that come into training. Actually, I spoke to our guys in education in the EDU, and they said there's 5, but I've made it 6. For my OCD, it didn't fit nicely on the presentation. They left a big gap in the left corner, so I've made it 6. But there's 6 elements, essentially, that we go through when we're trying to train someone. Every small topic that we do, everything I do on a Jumpstart, and what we do in one of our certification classes, which you may have been on, when we're trying to teach a new topic or a new subject, we'll go through 6 different steps. So, step 1. We start with an overview. Very simple, but explaining what is it we're going to do. You don't want to start something without actually knowing what it is you're going to do. If this is a new concept to someone, if they haven't done it before, it's quite nice to be able to just say, plainly, this is what we're going to do. We're going to look at profiles. We're going to install firewalls. That's the objective. That's what we're going to try and do. And then the next step, we start talking about the theory. What do you need to know in order to achieve that? This is typically much more passive, and it's very teacher-driven, typically. It doesn't have to be. But really, you're just trying to put down the basic knowledge, the basic theory that they're going to need in order to succeed in what it is you're trying to train them on. After we've looked at theory, have a bit of a discussion. Hopefully it's generated some discussion, maybe some questions. Give them the opportunity to question what you've just said and talk about the theory a bit more in depth. And then the next step, we do a demo. If you've been to one of our certification classes, you'll see this happening all the time. They show you something, we discuss it, we then demo it. We show you. What's the success criteria? What are we aiming for? Let's see that visually. That's very teacher-driven. That's less passive. That's much more visual learning. And then we get to the core of it, which is what we're doing with the interactive or participative model, which is practical. Have a go. Put what we've just talked into practice. Try it out. This is the core of it. This is what most people generally would find useful as a way of learning, is actually doing it for themselves. And that's the active learning, that's where that comes in. And then we've got the final step, which is review. It's an opportunity to review what you've done, look at how well you did it, answer any questions. That could be learner or teacher to learner, and then peer to peer as well. You can help answer questions for each other. And then hopefully you get that light bulb. It makes sense, you understand, you get the concept. So everything we do in the certification classes, and even what I do on a Jumpstart when I'm training a customer in Jamf Pro, when we talk about a topic or we take any individual topic or subject, we go through this cycle all the time. integrator course. So in integrator training, we aim to train and help integrators to deliver jump starts, like we do with, as an employee at Jamf. They'll go out with customers and they'll deliver jump starts as well. We do a 2-day course. This is focusing on the 2-day training course that we do, that they come and attend. And we hope to impart with them some practices and some tips and some tricks that they can use with customers to help deliver a jump start. So there's a few practical solutions that we give them, a few tips that we do. These are ones that I do all the time when I'm delivering a jump start, and I do find it does help, especially with customers, people who are new to the platform or unfamiliar with what we're trying to show them. So repetition. I do this all the time. I'll probably be doing this right now, just constantly repeats myself. It does frustrate people a lot. I repeat myself all the time, but I do find it really helps when you're training. Repetition, going over the point over and over, just to really cement that. If it's a new concept, if it's something that's brand new to them, they're not going to get it probably the first time you say it. If you then say it, move on, and hope they get it, chances are they probably will only remember 20% of it. You need to repeat yourself consistently. And one thing that I repeat myself with all the time is top to bottom, left to right. Actually, Ben stole this from me yesterday when he gave his presentation. He mentioned top to bottom, left to right. It's a really useful trick. If you're training someone, they're sat in front of a screen, they're looking at a screen, it's a new one to them, they're not used to the layout and the menus. You want to be constantly saying top to bottom, left to right. It encourages them to look around the screen, make sure that they haven't missed anything, essentially, that they've looked at every possible option before they hit save. Especially when you get to something like a configuration profile, and save how it goes, and no, cancel. So always saying top to bottom, left to right. And it's great, by the second day usually of training, you can see them stopping themselves and looking top to bottom, left to right on the screen. Which is really nice. Probably because they're just annoyed with me continually saying it. And then continual clarification. Oh, sorry, which one we got next? Hands off. I think this is one that the integrators find really difficult at first. When there's an issue, the first thing they want to do is jump on the computer and try and fix it. But the idea with what we do on a jump start is you're very hands off. The customer does the driving, you do the navigating. You should be able to explain something to them well enough that they can do it for themselves, and that's how they're going to learn. Not by you taking over and going, look at this, let me show you. So it's constantly hands off, and that's one that I think most people find really difficult. I'll spend 2 or 3 days training someone and I won't touch a computer. I try not to anyway, I really avoid it. It's the only way they're going to learn. And then we've got continual clarification and review. Every time we finish a topic, we clarify what the points were in that topic. What are the main things that you should be taking away from this section? Do you need an opportunity to review, question exactly what we said, and just reaffirm with them, let them make notes on it as well. And then finally, it's that opportunity to question. So questioning is really important. Chances are you say they've got any questions and they just look at you blankly and just say, give them a minute, tell them to have another look at it, go over it again. Chances are there will be a question, they just don't really feel like saying it straight away. You just need to give them the opportunity to sit and digest what you've just said and give them the opportunity to question. And there's some considerations that we must take into account when we're trying to train someone, when we're trying to impart knowledge. I've got a few of them here. This one's quite, this one, when it comes up, it's quite relevant for myself because I cover the EMEA region. So English not being a first language. This happens quite a lot. You have to be very clear in what you say. You have to be very deliberate in everything you say. And you have to be just mindful that this might not be the person's first language. They might speak English quite well, but it might not be their first language. And when you're doing a technical topic as well, sometimes things don't translate quite how you think they do. So it's just trying to take that into consideration. And also being mindful of learning difficulties as well. There are many out there, I'm not going to go through every learning difficulty there is. But some people have learning difficulties. They may need to stop regularly, just get up, have a walk around 5 minutes, come back, sit back down again. They might find it hard to concentrate on something for certain periods of time. So it's just being mindful of that when you're training someone. Another one would be visual impairment. Maybe they're colourblind. You're looking at, or any kind of visual impairment. They may be looking at a screen. You might be pointing saying click here, click here. Maybe it just takes them a bit longer before they recognise something and look there. And it's just trying to be a bit sympathetic there and trying to be a bit nice to them. It may be obvious to you and you may be getting frustrated, but you just got to calm down and just let them figure it out in their own time. And then there's a few learning styles. So you've got some people that may learn better independently. It's kind of tough luck because I'm there to train them. But I try and be a bit sympathetic if I can. They maybe want to learn a bit independently on their own, just give it to me and I'll learn it, give me a few hours. That's fine, but let me just try and give you some some help. So yeah, it's just trying to be a bit mindful of that. Maybe they don't appreciate having me stood there talking to them for 2 or 3 days. And maybe I just be a bit softer in the approach. They may prefer written communication, not verbal. They may just like a list of instructions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, And again, it's just being mindful of that. Everyone has their own different learning styles, their own different ways of learning, and they just might not appreciate having you teaching them in that way. So just a bit mindful for that. And then they might not be a visual learner. I think a lot of people these days tend to say, oh, I'm a visual learner, I'm very visual. How do we know that? You kind of assume you are, but they may not be. They may not be a visual learner. They may not pick things up like that. They may want that list of instructions to work through. And it's just having these considerations when you're delivering training, or you're trying to impart knowledge to someone. There's different ways that they might appreciate having it delivered to them. But then how do we know? How do we know that we've been successful? How can we measure success? I've been trying to train someone, I've been trying to show them something. Is it just going to say, okay, there you go, bye, and you walk away? We need to be able to assess exactly whether we've been successful in what we were trying to do. There's no point trying to tell someone something and then just assume they got it. So there's a few ways that we can assess. And again, if you're from education, you may be very familiar with these terms. Again, they're not made up words. We've got summative and formative assessment. So let's have a look. Summative assessment. You'll be very familiar with this if you've done one of our certification classes. You probably remember at school going into an exam hall, sitting down and having to do a test. Yeah, enjoyed that. Loved it. Yeah. So this would be it could be written or it could be a practical test, but it's a test at the end of a period of learning. And what it really aims to do is provide a data point to show progress. You can test someone at the beginning of the topic, you teach them, you show them, you train them, and then you test them again at the end. And then you can see definitely between the 2 points whether any progress has happened. Has learning taken place? Can I be sure that they've learned something? Well, yeah, here's the evidence of it. So that's summative assessment. That's probably one we're quite familiar with. If you do our certification classes, there is a test at the end. CCC, there's a written and a practical test. The other one's a practical, but that is a form of summative assessment. You need it to get your certification. Then we've got formative. Formative is continual ongoing assessment and feedback. So the whole way throughout training, you'll be continually assessing someone. Now this may be as basic as verbal communication, just communicating, talking with them, gauging from their responses and what they say. Have they learned what I've been trying to teach them? Does it sound like they've learned it? Do they sound a little bit unsure? Maybe I need to repeat myself. Maybe I need to go through those 6 steps again, just to ensure that they've actually understood what we've been talking about. Could be as simple as visual observation. I could watch them, I could just test them and say, right, we've just deployed a policy, you go ahead and deploy one now, show me. And I can watch them and see what they're doing. And you can gauge from visual observation whether they're actually picked up what it is you were trying to show them. And the final one's questioning. It sounds simple, but it's probably one of the most powerful tools to assess whether someone's actually learned something. Questioning you could talk about for weeks. You could go on for months about this stuff, training about questioning. It's really, really, really powerful tool that you can use. But what kind of questions are we asking? We need to consider our questions. So one way of doing this, again, if you're familiar with education, you'll be familiar with this, is Bloom's taxonomy. So what is Bloom's taxonomy? Well, there you go, there's a definition of it. It's a classification system used to define and distinguish different levels of human cognition, thinking, learning, and understanding. So I think there's about 3 guys, and Bloom's being one of them. I think he got the title of it, Bloom's taxonomy. I think it was back in the 50s. They were trying to design a logical framework for teaching and learning goals that would help researchers, educators understand the fundamental ways that people acquire knowledge, how they gain new skills, and how they understand. And that's kind of what it looks like. That's what they came up with. You could Looks a bit like the OSI, but there's only 6 levels. Essentially, you've got knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, evaluation. Again, you could go on for weeks like this. I just want to give you an overview. The idea of Bloom's taxonomy is you want to try and push towards a synthesis and an evaluation. It's a higher level, higher order of thinking, and a higher order of comprehension. It shows that you really know something. If you have to do those things at the top, you really know much more than just knowledge. Just having the knowledge isn't really as good as being able to evaluate on that. But how does this apply to questioning? Again, I think it's written somewhere that every presentation, if it's about education or about educating people, should have a really out-of-focus triangle, and that's mine. You need a really great Google image of an out-of-focus triangle. Essentially, this is it applying to questioning. So knowledge becomes remember, I think comprehension becomes understand, etc. They change slightly. The idea being, if I ask you to recall something, repeat back to me what I just said. That's very low-level, basic comprehension. That's just remembering something and repeating it back to me. Do you understand it? Well, then you might use questions that say, clarify, describe. Rather than saying, do you understand that? Yes, no. I'm looking for that higher order of thinking. It requires a different type of response, a higher level of response. Really what you want to push up for, though, is being able to justify, praise, argue, defend, judge. You're taking the information I've just explained to you, and you're then using it, and you're evaluating it. Or then create, ultimately, so you can use the information we've given you to design or assemble something. It's just a higher order of thinking, and you're trying to do that through questioning. Think of the type of questions you ask. You may start by just asking them basic, do you remember this? Or, explain this to me, repeat back to me. Then follow it up with another question that maybe comes from the center, something apply, execute, implement, show me. Try it out for yourself, do something different, create something with that. So questioning can be a really, really powerful tool when it comes to training. And it's just being mindful of what type of questions you ask and what type of questions you use to truly try and evaluate whether they've understood something. And that's the formative assessment part. That's my favourite, ongoing continual assessment. You can visually watch someone, you can ask questions, you engage with them. It's ongoing the entire time. So if we look back at the objective I gave you earlier, that's to appreciate the different ways people learn and to develop a toolbox of principles and practices to help aid their development and understanding. So really look at a methodology. Adopt one that works for you. Have a look at the different ones. We use this participative, active methodology. You could take something from that, you could take something from one of the others, but really try and have a methodology you use to train someone. It's no good just kind of thinking, oh yeah, I'll just show them this. You may want to decide how active or passive they're going to be. Active or passive learning. I mean, essentially what I'm doing up here is just a great example of do as I say, not as I do, because you're just passively listening to me, or perhaps you're not. But really try and get them to be active in learning. I really encourage that. I would always encourage an active learner, rather than just sitting there and talking to them for half an hour, 40 minutes, and then moving on to the next thing. And then actually think about how you're going to assess their progress. Rather than just telling them something and then assuming that they've understood it and walking away. Actually use an assessment method. Use some summative or formative method of assessment to gauge whether they've learned this. And encourage higher order thinking through questioning. Think about the types of questions that you ask them to gauge whether they've learned and understood something. Try and push up into the higher level of those Bloom's questions, into the kind of create and analyze sections, rather than just remembering and reciting back to you. It doesn't take much of a response there. And that really kind of brings into a value. If you speak to any of the employees at Jamf, what values they think are most important, the number one that comes up is continual self-improvement. And I'd encourage you to do that when you're trying to train someone. Continually self-improve. Try and use a methodology, change your methodology, change your questioning, what worked, what didn't work. Assess how well you did and try and improve for the next time. And that's one of the core values at Jamf. If you speak to any one of the employees, they'll probably mention that to you, continual self-improvement.
Well, thank you very much.
That's all right. No,